Hey, good afternoon. This is Samir, and I'm going to be giving you a quick stock market weekly update for the week of September 1st. So let's get right into it. So, first things first, today's actually Wednesday. So, I usually do this on the weekend. It was Labor Day weekend. So, kind of was just taking the time off, enjoying myself. In terms of economic events for this week, we did have some red calendar events coming in ISM manufacturing for the Tuesday. Then we had JOLTS job openings on the Wednesday. Looks like it's a little under what was forecasted for both of these red calendar events. ISM's pretty big in terms of kind of seeing as a leading indicator for manufacturing and business continuity and business growth. Jolt again, job openings, that's a little under what was expected. We do have ADP non-farm employment change for Thursday, as well as unemployment claims. That's good. Those are going to be pretty big. Then we have ISM services, and then finally wrapping up the Friday of, we have the non-farm payroll employment change as well as unemployment rate. So they're looking for possibly an uptick, 0.1% for the unemployment rate. As I had mentioned a week before, 2 weeks before, the unemployment rate has been pretty steady, pretty consistent around that 4 to 4.2% rate for about over a year now, which is pretty good. Again, more of that uptick in the discouraged workers, so that U6 unemployment is kind of where we slowly it's been uptaking. So that's something you definitely want to keep an eye out for. In terms of earnings for this week, as you can see, uh, not many, nothing really for Monday, not many for Tuesday. The NEO one was pretty good. Um, and then for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, again, yeah, we got some Dollar Tree, Salesforce, Macy's, and DocuSign, some tech companies in here, UiPath, HPE. HPE is a big one, kind of similar to Dell. Maybe get an understanding of some of the hardware infrastructure in terms of this AI cycle that we're in, kind of get a better understanding of where they're at in the process. Usually HPE, Dell, SMCI, and now even CoreWeave. I think I'm missing maybe one or two more, maybe NBI US, Nebius. Pretty big in terms of infrastructure for the AI as well as the data centers. So kind of interesting to see what they have to say. Now, jumping into the markets, we're going to be taking a look at the SPX real quick, and I'm going to turn this off. Moving averages, kind of just look at it in terms of the monthly print so far, because last week was the end of August. In terms of monthly print, you do see pretty strong green candle close um, from start to finish. We did drop a little bit, but it's pretty full-bodied candle. We might see something kind of like this beginning to form, but again, this is just like speculation. We want to always take a step back and kind of look at where we are and what's happening. Sometimes you got to look in the past to see what's going to happen in the future, right? And with that said, if the quantitative easing cycle does begin, then we're probably going to see assets increase, gold, commodities, um, companies within the S&P 500, for example. So once rates come down, we will probably see that inverse relationship play out. So overall, going to be pretty much bullish going into the remainder of the year. And this, of course, all depends on if they do, in fact, begin the quantitative easing cycle. Now, if we go to daily print, we are kind of sitting around some chop, uh, pulling the moving averages here, kind of been going sideways. One can make the argument since end of July, really, we had good news and it was kind of selling off, but we've kind of entered this kind of like this range over here almost, and yeah, we might be kind of uptrending, but we may see a little bit more of that throughout September up until that FOMC meeting, which may be a catalyst that sends us higher. So we got a red body candle so far on the SPX. It's kind of sitting in between, so it's kind of sitting in between the 10 and 20 day moving average. If it drops from here based off of news, it can probably come back. And this is the 50-day moving average here, and this one down here is a 55. Some people say the 55-day moving average is a test to see if you have institutional support. So it's possible for it to come down here and, you know, maybe retest this level here. This right here is possibly an order block. So it's definitely, we can probably see here kind of like this head and shoulders. If it breaks this level, it comes over here, no doubt. Again, this is just speculation. In terms of my positioning, just long term, long. But if I can average down into things, I definitely will. Kind of similar story here. More of a harder rejection. The daily print thus far, it has yet to actually close for the day. If I were to turn this off, just to kind of show you something, it came back and filled this fair value gap on this daily time frame, and it may continue to come down over here at this level, where one can make the argument this may be like some kind of an order block here, where it's come here numerous times and bounced. Maybe not here because this was more volatility driven event. Here, here. So it might come back and test 2290, I guess like 2300, you know, for round numbers sake. And again, that kind of coincides with the 50-day moving average, 55-day moving average, which I had mentioned before. 55-day moving average usually denotes whether or not you have institutional support or if you've lost institutional support. So if for some reason things go awry and price drops to here, it is possible that we lose institutional support. And yeah, there's room for this to drop even more. Again, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying there's the potential for it to happen. So the VIX is down today after yesterday's spike. We did get to pretty close to 20, 19 and a half. But one thing to note, it kind of is starting to increase, which makes sense because that is a little bit of the seasonality where we will see September is technically supposed to be a weaker month, one of the weakest months, I think the weakest month in the year, seasonally speaking, and we'll usually see a rise in volatility as a result. So the volatility index usually goes up around this time of year, and then kind of peaks off in October. So it's a potential for that to happen. With that said, it looks like thus far the volatility index is kind of consolidating around this range here. So there may be some increased volatility. There may be increased volatility leading up to the FOMC meeting, or we may see it decrease depending on how the events transpire. So let's check out the dollar. So dollar is down 9.5% on the year thus far. With that said, it's a pretty interesting spot because it's dependent on a few data points. For example, if and when we begin this quantitative easing cycle, if inflation is to uptick, then yes, assets, commodities will go up, which is okay, which is good, but usually the dollar will go down. So therefore, the purchasing power of the dollar will go down. Again, this is a very complex and intricate system, but usually when the M2 supply, the money supply increases, meaning there's more money being printed, and inflation increases, then you may see the devaluation of the dollar. So we may see continued downside, kind of forming a channel where you can start to see an upper bound and a lower bound. I went to the weekly time frame because sometimes it's kind of hard to do it on the monthly time frame to get an understanding of where we're at. Yeah, it's something like that. You know, it's not a perfect thing. Volatility exists. The market is not necessarily perfect, right? If it was, then it would be a vacuum. We had a little bit of compression for the week of the previous week. Same story. Kind of nearing the 50-day moving average, 55-day moving average. That may be a test. That may also signify a low. depending on how things play out in terms of economic catalysts. Same thing with Qs, nothing really to say about that. And we can see the same thing again with NVIDIA compared to the Qs, compared to the SPX, SPY, etc. Just because the weight of NVIDIA in the overall market, I think it's about 8% of the SPY. So it'll definitely play a role in how the overall market is moving. As you can see, going into the end of August to now, had a bit of a correction, down almost 10%. Again, we are in this interesting territory. So price is kind of consolidating between the 50-day and the 55-day moving average. Again, that 55-day moving average usually denotes if you have institutional support or not. With that said, this may turn out to be something like this, where we kind of do get a little bit maybe of like a bull flag consolidation here. My hypothesis is we'll probably be more in a range like this for a little bit of time. Is it possible for it to continue to go up? Absolutely. But just based off their previous earnings, the guidance, people are a bit concerned that the growth is slowing down. Is it possible? But yeah, I think so. I mean, and it's done it before in the past. There's nothing wrong with it if it consolidates through time, while the market breadth gets better and other underlying assets and or sectors start to increase via a broadening out. Absolutely. Is it possible for price to kind of pull back a little bit more? Yeah, and that's kind of what I was just mentioning, how depending on how things happen here, if the price does drop below this 55-day moving average, in my opinion, there's less noise. So when you go out to the monthly time frame or the weekly time frame, there's a little bit less noise than the day-to-day, which is why I prefer. Just look at previous price action, just a year ago. For example, this massive run up, and then at some point it just kind of stalled out, and there's nothing wrong with that. And price just went sideways until another impulse move. So am I saying it's going to do that 100%? No, not at all. But what I'm saying is it can do that, and it has the potential to do that. So Microsoft has been bouncing at this specific level here. So I didn't really look at the unusual option flows. It may be this 500 to 495, maybe an order block. So I'm going to mark this off for my chart. 500. It's also a psychological number. It's a nice round number, 500. And again, same kind of story. Market moves in fractals. Now the difference here is Microsoft has rejected the 55-day moving average. As you can see here, it wicked. And thus far, the day has yet to finish, but it looks like it's printing below the 55-day moving average. So, yeah, I mean, it can probably drop a little bit more. Again, not saying it can't, or not saying it will, but what I'm trying to say is it can. Let me come back down here and fill this inefficiency on the weekly time frame. So last week I talked about Apple, and I was mentioning how. So last week I talked about Apple, and I was kind of mentioning how the week of August 4th was, for me, in my opinion, like a fundamental shift in the company. Just because Tim Cook was at the White House, he made the announcement of opening up manufacturing in the United States, as well as the India tariffs no longer affecting the company. So since then, price really hasn't come back down to this level to maybe retest. So it looks like price is auctioning and accepting above this 225 level. We did manage to see this bull flag, and then via the Google news coming out, of course, was definitely bullish for Apple as well. And I believe going into next week, Apple's going to have their Apple event. I think it's September 9th, September 10th. Looking forward to it. That might be another strong catalyst for the company. Tesla's still kind of Now Tesla's still kind of in this range here. Prices, it broke out a few times. Um, but it looks like this level here has been kind of more of a resistance. But as you can see, with every breakout, it is uptrending, which is a good sign. Price is kind of reaching an equilibrium here. And you can see that because volatility is contracting. So there are less wider swings in the price action. So price discovery has almost reached price equilibrium. So we may see some breakout in Tesla, and I'm not too sure if it'll be to the upside or to the downside. If I was to consider everything going on with Tesla full self-driving, their Optimus humanoid, etc., I think they're going to be pretty much to the upside. And of course, we want to always take a step back and what is going on the macroeconomic scale. If rates come down, I think that's only going to help businesses. So a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I was kind of mentioning how after earnings, price came back, retested this level. It did sell, but we kind of are starting to wedge, and there's nothing wrong with this. It just took the volatility of that move out, and price is starting to equalize as well. So again, probably may see an upward move. I know tariffs may affect Amazon as an e-commerce giant more so than others, but with that said, they do a very good job with AWS, and they're one of the big companies that does cloud, and I think some of their revenue is so I think more of their revenue is starting to come from cloud, and at some point you may see a transition period where, now with Meta, again, there was the news that they were doing the hiring freeze. Since then, prices come back down. It's kind of retesting this level here, which may act as a support level. Meta actually fundamentally is very strong on the fundamental side, which I didn't really consider. I think it's one of the undervalued companies still. And finally, Google in terms of the Mag 7. Google popped off for sure, big time. It's still holding pretty well after the news. And again, the US judge issued the decision, antitrust case. Google does not have to sell off Google Chrome. Pretty big news. After hours, it just popped, It popped. Up 11%, about 10% now. And yeah, again, intrinsic value of Google, if we use Firm Foundations theory, it's pretty good. Kind of right where it needs to be, right? Efficient market. With that said, I think price is probably going to continue to uptrend just because a lot of uncertainty in regards to the company is kind of out of the way. So I want to take a look at Alibaba. This is on my radar. I'm pretty much long in this company because when you look at the fundamentals of the company, it seems fundamentally undervalued. And like, for example, their fundamentals are way better than they were back in 2020, 2021. And as you can see, price was accepted in the upper ranges of 200, the lower ranges of 300. So this for me is a nice buy and hold. In terms of price action, they popped after earnings, and this was on two things. So the earnings was a bit mixed. The revenue was down about 1.5%, but the earnings per share was a little bit better. But I think what set the tone and the sentiment shift was the fact that they are going to be creating their own AI chips moving forward, or attempting to do so, from my understanding. And a lot more of the revenue is coming from cloud. So overall, thus far, since earnings, day after earnings was very strong, and yesterday was very strong. Today is a bit uncertainty. Volume is a little bit lower, so it may be exhaustion, but again, the daily time frame may be susceptible to noise. And as I mentioned, this is a longer position for me. So I'm okay with the day to day because I know, in my opinion, this company is undervalued, in my opinion. So I'm okay with the day-to-day noise. If I zoom out on the bigger time frames, um, you know, probably a lot more room for growth throughout the remainder of the year, as well as multiple years to come. And that's kind of just my take on Alibaba. So gold was consolidating for a few months after this massive move, and it did have a squeeze on it, and it did pop this week. It's up 3.5%. With that said, as I had mentioned earlier, one of the core principles when quantitative easing happens, assets and commodities will go up in price. So if you just use this idea, then it's no doubt gold, one may argue, the de facto uh, hedge against inflation is going to continue to go up. So yeah, I definitely think gold will probably continue to go up into the latter half of this decade. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Please drop a like and comment below if you like what you saw. Drop a comment, and see you in the next one.